Welcome back, friends. It's another episode of The Mindful CEO, where we're exploring the tension between mindfulness and CEO-ness. Hello, Aaron.
Yes. Yo-ness. Is
Yo-ness.
it CO-ness or CO-osity? I don't.
I like that too.
CO
That's pretty
to
good.
CO-osity?
C. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it could
good.
be. Yeah, good. All right. Well, just a heads up for everybody. They are replacing we call them telephone poles still, don't we?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Like, right? We still call them telephone poles, even though
I do. Gen
but
X,
they're
baby.
not
Gen
really
X.
telephone poles, are they?
Yeah.
I mean,
Power lines, I don't know.
they're electric power poles, power utilities, but I still have in my mind that they're telephone poles, but
That's so
I
funny.
don't think that's what they really are anymore. Anyway, they're replacing them on my street, and so my power is out, and I'm on battery, and I'm on hotspot. So if I lag, that's why. Okay. And if I
Lots of grace for you
disappear,
today, Aaron. Yeah.
exactly. And if I disappear, it's because I hate you. That's the important part. If this gets too weird, I'm just going to log off and
That's
pretend
right. Pretend it was the power telephone poles.
that's what happened. Anyway, so I'm excited. Our guest, Katherine McCord, is super interesting leadership coach and speaker, and a couple of topics that I'm interested in getting into with Katherine. But I'll let her introduce herself. Welcome to the show, Katherine. Thanks for making the time to be with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris and Aaron. I'm excited to be here with you today. And I am a national human resources and recruiting consultant. I've built out programs for all different types of organizations, run programs, done interim work, all that kind of thing. I have also worked with a lot of executives in building their operations and becoming successful leaders. And then I also speak and teach across the world on a few different interesting topics, ranging from my areas of professional expertise over to neurodiversity and even defeating the ego mechanism to respond in curiosity, which I know we'll be talking about here shortly.
Yes. Well,
Yeah,
we
love
should
that.
start with that because
Yeah, let's start there.
you pop that bubble. So let's talk about that because
Mhm.
mindfulness is deeply connected to the Buddhist principles of ego death, and so and the way eliminating the ego opens up or is as either counterpoint or access to, I don't know which is probably more accurate, beginner's mind. But talk to me about defeating the ego and responding with curiosity. What does that mean in the HR context and in your context?
So first of all, it's very important to understand what the ego mechanism is. A lot of people think ego means that you think that you're the best in the whole wide world, right? Or that you're just, such a wonderful person and everybody else is beneath you. That is not actually correct. Now, that can be a symptom of or manifestation of the ego, but the actual ego is a biological mechanism that is part of the fight or flight response. And so it's located in the back and base of the brain. Um, and it is something that's activated whenever we feel that something is contrary to what we believe. Our brain needs to be safe in order to in order to feel, like it can function at its highest level, right? So it's going to do anything it can to keep itself safe. And if it is not correct, it is not safe. That is what our brain knows for very primitive instincts. So if somebody says something contrary to what we believe to be true, it can very easily activate the ego mechanism unless we have trained ourselves for that not to happen. And even when we train ourselves, it will still occasionally happen from time to time. So we have to learn to recognize the triggers and then respond appropriately.
And so,
Go ahead.
just when you say it, well, what's the downside of it triggering? I mean, I know from a mindfulness perspective, but tell me
Right.
from your perspective.
So from a practical perspective, the downsides are number one to your own body, that all the incorrect chemicals and all the stress chemicals get released. So you start getting physically uncomfortable. Letting this run amok can cause increased blood pressure. It can create digestive problems. It can create all kinds of neurological problems, anxiety, all of these kinds of things. And that's just for yourself. In terms of communicating with others, this shuts down your ability to truly communicate and understand other people, because your brain is operating on the assumption that we are right, we are the center of the universe. Even if consciously you know that's not true, your brain doesn't. So you start to operate on a very different level, and therefore it shuts down your ability to appropriately communicate and to appropriately engage other people, which of course leads into the workplace and how we engage other humans.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I'm just looking. Yeah. So what are the kind? So I'm just trying to slow down what you just said, because there's a lot in there. So there's this space of not being the center of the universe, right?
Yeah.
And for sure I relate to that, like what I would consider to be, the vernacular usage of the word ego is that you're the center of the universe, right? That's the thing. And so you're saying that phenomenon is a function of a reaction mechanism in the brain to keep it safe, to keep the
Yes.
keep
Yes, and
safe.
you can look this information up, like in the National Institute of Health and the National Library of Medicine. They both have wonderful studies published on this topic. And it's very interesting because when you start to learn to turn it off, which is very easy to learn to do, and I'll give you the quick rundown on that in just a moment. When you start to learn to turn it off, what you start to realize is how much you've actually been missing your entire life, how much communication, how much reception, how much just observation you've truly missed. And you start to realize what a jerk you've been, and quite unintentionally, right? You didn't know, you didn't realize, your body was just doing this, and it was just this subconscious, primitive aspect of your brain. And then you start to go, oh. And for instance, one of the funniest ones I catch my clients with, who are, executives, leaders, all of that in their organizations, is that when somebody has told them something and then they automatically respond with that won't work because, or that, no, they say that won't work, or we do it this way. This is my all-time favorite. This is the one I can always catch them in every single time. Well, we've always done it this way. That is the most ultimate example of your ego going, no, we're right. Or no, I'm scared to have more work, or no, I'm scared to have to change this because I'm only focused on this one thing, right? And so your brain is protecting you, but really what you need to be doing is listening, because maybe what this person says is super smart, right? So learning to turn that off, and all you have to do, and I do when I teach the classes, I walk through the very simple steps and how to do this. It literally takes 5 minutes to start the whole thing. And then you just practice it once a day for a few days, and then your brain just starts getting it. But basically what you do is you purposefully activate it. You activate the ego mechanism. And I tell people to get on social media and read something that you'll disagree with, like that will really irritate you, right? Political content is great for this. And now it's important when you do this part of the exercise, do not respond to anything that you see. This is about you recognizing you. And so you look at this content, you feel it. Now, where do you feel it? What are you feeling? When this is activated, you'll typically feel it around the tops of your shoulders, in your neck, all of this, and it's at the top of your spine. And it's important to start to realize, oh, this is what's happening. Like, teach your brain, consciously recognize it, consciously process it. Do that for a few minutes. Then you go back and you sit by yourself and you teach yourself a little tactic that says, like, for me, I touch these two fingers together, my third and my thumb. And I say, when I do this, I have clean air to breathe. I have a roof over my head. I have food in the pantry, and I am safe. And I process that. And that's important to do. It sounds hokey, but it's important to do, because then when you do your little trigger, what happens is your body will automatically release serotonin and calm you down and give you happy, positive chemicals. And so then what happens is, then when you go back and you test this again and you activate that ego mechanism, and then you do your trigger and the happy chemicals come, you can now respond from a completely different standpoint, from a healthy standpoint, and actually really receive what's being said, analyze it, and look at it from a more intellectual perspective, as opposed to that very primitive perspective.
I hear a couple things in here, Aaron. Like, one is like, as Katherine, as you're describing that, the body scan meditation that you teach in your 9-week course, that there is whether it's interacting with others or your own life circumstance that's causing a reaction, for you to be able to do a body scan meditation and be like, what am I feeling? This is what my butt feels like in the chair, except now we're
Yeah.
adding a little bit to, this is what it feels like when my ego is being on defense.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting. I also think there's a piece of, as you were describing it, Catherine, the two instances are, one, people listening to respond. They don't actually listen. We're never
Mhm.
actually in a conversation where we can hear what the other's saying, because that defense is like, I'm the center. I'm just listening for how what you say is safe or not safe. And that's the
Mhm.
entire lens or filter I'm filtering your words through. So there's the
Yeah.
interpersonal, and then and then Aaron, when we talk about mindfulness and our own relationship to the divine, or our higher self, whatever, we can't even listen to what's coming through
Mhm.
consciously, energetically, divinely, because if it says something that triggers the defense, we're like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so we
Yeah.
can't even get to the goods of what we're asking for from the universe because of this defense mechanism. So I'm
And
super
that's
fascinating, Catherine.
exactly it. Like it's incredible. In fact, I have friends who do a lot of mindfulness coaching and that kind of thing. And they talk about this now in their presentations as well. We've kind of collaborated, and it makes such a difference just in how you process your own life, your own surroundings, your personal relationships, your professional relationships. And one of the things too because I've had people go, well, how do I know if my ego mechanism is running amok? I'm like, well, number one, if you haven't consciously worked on it, I promise you that it is, because again, it's a subconscious, natural process, right? And don't feel bad, you didn't know it. It's okay, right? So no shame, no blame. But um, one of the first things that you could do is, have you ever said about another person, well, I know that's what they meant? No, you don't. No, you do not. Based on your past experience and your own understanding, right? Again, coming back to you, that's what's happening. But that's not that person's
Ooh,
reality.
That's good.
Your past experience is not their reality, right? And
Yeah.
so you still need to be curious. And so saying things like, and what I tell people is, when you engage with curiosity, it's all about asking questions to really understand and absorb. So I'm hearing you say these words. And the first thing is to separate what's actually being said from how it's making you feel, right? So these are the things you're actually saying to me. So these are the actual words. What is your intent? That's a great statement, right? Like, what is your intent? If it's a personal conversation at work, tell me what the goal or the mission of this is. Tell me more about that. That's another one. So I'm a terrible artist, right? I have been my whole life. It's tragic. I can't even draw stick figures properly. It's not good. And so my mother, instead of shaming my terrible artwork when I was a child and saying, what on earth is this, which she would have had every right to do, she would say, tell me more about this
Hmm.
and let me share the details. And when you say to somebody, so as a boss, let's say, as an employer, as a team lead, however you want to say it, when you're receiving work that maybe isn't exactly what you expected, say, tell me more about this, because there could be a reason they did it that way. You could have not communicated well, all these different things, right? So say, tell me more about this. So using some of these kind of key welcoming phrases, because that sets your mind up to say, we want to hear this, right? We want to receive whatever this is saying, and then go from there. That makes such a difference.
it's great.
Yeah.
So much, Catherine. It's super validating. I've been on this little trip of so far this week, just of having things that I have come up with independently, discovered for myself, then been validated out in the world,
Hmm.
right? So, Chris, you're gonna freak out, okay, about this one. This is a mild tangent, Catherine, but just inside that world of just things being validated by outside sources. Uh, I was doing um, working on my book proposal, and one of the questions my coach asked me is, okay, well, what books would Amazon put this next to?
Hmm.
Mhm.
And so so I asked ChatGPT, what books would, ChatGPT has my books. I was like, what books would Amazon put it up against? And there's a book, and I have not with you, Chris. It's called How to Stay Human in a Fucked Up World.
Nice.
Mindfulness. It's all the subtitles almost identical as well. Catherine, I'm
Wow.
writing a book called. I have a course and a book
Yeah.
called How to Live a Grateful Life in a Fucked Up World.
Love it. Love
And
it. That is
and
so
now there's a
perfect. Good.
book printed in 2019 called How to Stay Human in a Fucked Up World. I'm like, how did this happen? Now I don't know if there's a copyright problem that I'm going to wind up with, but I was like, okay, that's both imposter syndrome and really validating. Um, and then Catherine, just inside your, what you said, just want to go back to this part, you know, about I have clean water and a roof over my head
Mm,
and my
Mm,
socks are dry.
mm, mm.
yeah.
And that's, basic gratitude 101. That's
Yeah.
the base level, the easiest when I get, you know, so I do gratitude meditations every morning on Facebook.
Yeah.
And that's the easiest piece of gratitude for anyone just to stumble across and to generate that experience for themselves so
Yeah.
that they're in the presence of, and like you said, the releasing the serotonin. It's the problem I have with gratitude journaling is that it's not embodying anything. You're just listing
Right.
something out. If you don't take the time to release that serotonin, what's the point? And
Yeah.
and you just, share that's the point, is that
Yeah.
you feel safe in that moment. You're like, everything relaxes and let's go. And you
Mhm.
can actually just be in the presence of,
Yeah.
clean water and dry socks. And here you
Yeah.
are. Um, And if you can do that in the moment of someone talking to you, the thing that you brought to the equation, Catherine, I think is fascinating and really useful is, um, becoming sensitive to on one hand, you're speaking to the utility of what I've been calling gratitude, and you're just calling for
Right.
it safe. But either way, whatever label you want to place on it is the same physical sensations of serotonin being released and that vibration being present. If you
Right.
want to label it being safe or being grateful, it's fine either way. But the utility of that in dialogue, in action, in your life, like, which is why I think it's particularly useful to start your day with that as a baseline. If you can, take 10 minutes and just release that serotonin, as you said, if you can
Yeah.
take 10 minutes and feel that vibration, you've got a baseline established for your day you can return to. And then you just brought
And
to the equation when you'd want to return to it.
yeah. And this is a great time to do it. And I will tell you too, um, I have 8 disabilities if you go by the legal definition of the term. Okay. And people are like, wait, how many? Yes, 8. I have 8. And in fact, I've officially cut my doctor off. She's not allowed to give me any more
Nice.
diagnoses. This is it. You just got to roll them into something else. Um, or cure something and then we can have another one. Um, so one of the diagnoses that I've had it for many years. In fact, I was not officially diagnosed because when it manifested, I was actually too young to be officially diagnosed. But since the age of 13, I presented with all of the signs of bipolar 1. And I was determined because the medications at that time, this is not true anymore, the medications at that time were not very safe medications, especially not for a child. And so I said, I don't want to medicate, but I know I have to manage it. So what do we do? And my parents, being the incredible humans that they are, number one, helped set me up with some tools on their own, especially my father, who grew up around this type of thing. And then also they found me a psychologist to help me learn self-mapping and to be able to take care of myself. And one of the most interesting things that I learned, and I've shared this with so many people who have depression, who have bipolar, which is part of that is depressive cycles, is that you can actually teach your body how to function and how to elevate in a time of chemical depression. And that's one of the things that I learned. And one of the things I do is when I'm going through that and my body has all the wrong chemicals and just, thinks that we're dying, basically, is that I wake up and I say, all right, good clean oxygen, right? and look at this nice room I'm in. Look at this comfy bed, my nice blanket. I have somebody in the other room who loves me. I have all of my, 500 animals. I have, all of these things. I have food I can eat, and I am okay. And nothing bad has happened to me today because I just woke up, right? So I am okay. And I kind of go through this and I let my body really process that. And it actually does, you can feel it change the chemicals in your body. And so when people say, how are you so functional without medication and with and you run businesses and you do all these things, I said, that's a big trick, is that I have actually taught my body how to self-soothe itself. And I'm not saying that's the answer for everyone and it's a cure-all, but it certainly makes a big difference.
Yeah, well, that's mindfulness. I mean, you described it that way, and I would just say that I don't take the just out. I don't want to any way diminish it or qualify it. That's
No, it's mindfulness. No, that is exactly what it
what I
is.
would call mind. You wake
Yeah.
up and you pay attention in the present on
Mhm.
purpose without judgment.
Yes. And yeah,
That's
and I mean, you
mindfulness.
cannot change, if your body has wacky chemicals, you can't do much about that without medication, right? But what you can do is learn to work with that, right? And how to then soothe the body and help it come to a better stasis.
I think, Aaron, you've done some meditations in the past, and I've experimented this with myself. Just even some changing your state, like for me, smiling.
Mm.
That there's something that when I smile, even if I'm not feeling like smiling, it's wild because I can feel it. I can physically
Yep.
feel something shifts when I smile.
Yep.
Even when I
Totally.
don't want to smile, it's almost weird because like, wait, I'm trying not to smile right. I'm trying not to feel that way. Trying to be right about why I feel bad. But if I smile, it does shift something for me.
Yeah.
Every
So
morning
fun.
it's funny when I started this in the mindfulness in the gratitude meditations in the morning. It's become a regular part of it now. And I would think I do it almost every day now. Included as part of the meditation
Mm.
is, after we take an opportunity to anchor our awareness around the breath,
Mhm.
and you've done that for a minute or two, you can soften the eyes and smile with the eyes
Yeah.
in a gentle and maybe a little small Buddha smile on the lips, and then notice the changes,
Mm.
experience the changes, sense into the changes in the body of breathing through a smile. And it's just a radical different, I don't know, it's radical, but it's definitely a different experience when you breathe quietly through a smile. It's just different. You have a different
It is.
vibration. And
Yeah.
if you, I mean, and as you practice that, like you point to, Catherine, like practice that. And I like having um, what do you call it? A
Physical trigger.
trigger, a physical
Yeah.
trigger, right? Not a mnemonic, but a physical trigger. Um, for it's a really useful way to include that into the rest of your day.
Yeah.
Like, you can definitely create that. Like,
Oh,
that's a
I
way
can
of,
totally trick my body now. Now that my body knows that signal, I can do that and just get that serotonin anytime I want it. I'm like, this is the best
Mm.
thing. I can I can change my body chemicals like
it's,
that.
it's no different than Pavlov's dog. It's no, that's
Yeah, it is. Your
you're
your body is
training.
just being taught, and that's
Mm.
it. And I tell people, a friend of mine says the most genius thing in her coaching and in her speaking. Her name is Lisa Duke, and she does executive function and also weight loss coaching. And it's not about diet or anything. It's just about changing your mindset, right, and your habits. And she said, we are the boss of our minds, not the other way around.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
you can tell your mind what it needs to be doing, and that's it. Your mind is not the boss of you. And I really like that mindset because it does remind us, oh yeah, right, we're in charge. We drive this thing,
Well,
right?
you
Like,
got to come
we
from,
have
see, but
choices.
that's a radical thing, Catherine, because there's
Mhm.
for most people, there's very little separation between them and their mind, or no separation between them and their mind. There is not a
Yeah.
That's
them
fair.
and then what they think. There's just what they think is reality. There's no,
Yeah. Oh no, no.
which is
It's
what
and I tell
meditation provides.
and that primitive brain is especially completely separate from the conscious mind. I mean, it's even physically, so you can see it like in diagrams of brain, that it's physically separate. And so bringing things from our subconscious mind into our conscious mind completely changes our processing and how we function and how we think and how we move. And so bringing that back to the professional world, right? You have then the ability to better understand what others are communicating, better look at a project, better to better look at the scope of your work and your company and where it's going. And also this comes into play very heavily with ethics and integrity. So one thing that went very, very wrong in the inclusion movement, right? This movement for inclusion. And I want to be very clear what I mean when I say inclusion. Inclusion is for literally everyone, right? It's creating kind of a universal design for the workplace, right? That was supposed to be the goal.
Yeah,
was
we're
basically
very clear on this show what diversity, equity,
yeah, right,
inclusion
yeah.
means
But
and what it doesn't fucking
so
mean. Okay, we're
yeah,
not.
so it was
No
basically
one here is
supposed to
confused
be
about those three words.
supposed to be universal design. That was, but inclusion, the inclusion movement itself did not have very good branding, and there was a lot of mixed messages. And then one of the things too that we got very wrong is that we forgot to break down the ego mechanism and to focus on that, because without that, the rest of it will not happen. Because what happens is you have people that go, well, I like it this way. So including me means it can only be this way. And then this good person goes, well, if you include me, it can only be this way. No, that is not how that goes. If we come together and we listen, first of all, what we realize is that very often we have the same mission. We just have different ways to get there. And so bringing everything back to a mission focus is really productive as opposed to focusing on these auxiliary details, right? And then also, again, learning to listen and find the compromise and to build structure from there. And so ensuring that you're aligning with integrity. So if you're saying we're an organization that wants to hire and support people with disabilities and coming and thriving in the workplace, great. So then you need to adjust to make sure that things are comfortable for them, right? And when they tell you something's a problem, don't go, well, this is how we do it, suck it up. Just make a simple alteration, right? And it's really funny because I've had a lot of people over the years, a lot of companies tell me, oh, it's going to be so much work. Oh, we're going to have to change so much. And I get them going and I kind of get the ball rolling, and they start to see how simple all of this really is and how simple making accommodation standard options actually is and how very simple universal workforce and workplace design actually is. And then they're going, well, this saves us a lot of time and money. Why weren't we always doing this?
Do you find, Katherine, that can go both ways? One way being I'm saying this is what would make me feel safe. This is what adjustment you could make in the workplace for me. But I'm speaking from what I think is right. My ego is saying this is what would make me safe. There's a give and take, I think, for if the question came back and it said, tell me more about that suggestion you made. And then they can explain why that thing helps. They might also be able to kind of feel safe, and instead of it being a demand, which is I think where you get the power struggle, because you're like, this has to happen for me to feel safe, and if you don't do it, then you're not being inclusive. And yeah. But if there was some onboarding or training in high school or middle school, or I don't know, something that got upriver from, right, upstream from, where we start having these demands with one another about what's going to make me feel safe. And if you can't provide that, then I'm not going to feel safe. Now we're just kind of stuck.
Yes, and that's exactly it. And again, I completely agree with that. Coming at it, everything from a point of conversation, and this is what I ask people when it comes to asking for an accommodation, anything like that. And I always tell people, remember, I've been on all sides of this, right? So I completely understand all sides. And I've even had individuals reach out and ask for my help and how to approach their company. What I tell them is focus on the mission. Okay, what is it that you ultimately need? So for instance, one accommodation that I sometimes have to ask from my clients or whomever is to be off camera, because every once in a while, I do have a seizure disorder, and every once in a while it is not safe for me to be on camera. So what is the goal for me? Safety, right? That's my goal. That's my mission, period. How we come to that safety can be flexible, right? So focus on the mission of what you actually need. That's the real thing, right? And then how we get there, be flexible and be willing to work with people a little bit on that. That's how I like to explain
that.
To people.
Yeah, I like it because I feel like sometimes, whether this is in a corporate setting or even in our personal lives, the answer to how we get somewhere is yet to be revealed. I call it emergent.
Yes.
Like, The
Yes.
wisdom is emergent. You have to take the purple crayon for a walk. You can't sit there and demand from the universe, this is how I want it to be. You need to be open to, this is the mission where I want to go. And then if you're listening the way you're describing it to the universe or to your partners and corporations, you can be open to how the crayon unfolds, how the conversation or the solution unfolds. But because we're so attached to that safety, we say, this is how it has to be for me to feel safe. And then we sort of choke off the divine intervention, if you will.
Well, and a lot of people have had experienced safety in one way, and then they think, well, that's the only way I can experience safety. And I'm like, nope.
Sure, because
I
it's
promise
familiar,
you
because
there
it's
are other
known.
ways that can be done. Yeah. But also, and what I tell workplaces too is, as much as possible, and of course there will be things like compliance and very practical elements, right, that do have to be considered, laws, that kind of thing that we have to work within, right? But outside of that, is the work getting done? Yes. Then don't worry about how. Don't worry about it. No. Keep it simple. And in fact, it's been really funny over the years. I've had executives push back on me for that. I was designing a national recruiting program for an organization who was enterprise level, and for some ridiculous reason had kept all of their recruiting by the branch, and it was just not working very well. And so I was building out that centralized process. And they reached out, but they're like, oh, well, I sent my first big report when the time came, and they go, oh, well, there's a bunch of metrics missing. I said, okay, what do you think's missing? And they go, well, number of emails sent, number of calls made, this, that, and the other. And I go, are any of that the mission of our department? Well, no. I said, then you don't need to know it. I said, neither do I. I don't care. I don't care if my recruiter, if they have 20 positions to fill and they fill those 20 positions. I don't care if it took 20 candidates to do it. I don't care if it took 100. I don't care, I don't care if it took 10 phone calls or 10 emails or whatever. I don't care. We did the thing.
That's good.
As long as the hiring team is happy and the candidates are happy and the time to fill is low and all that, we're done. We did our job, right? So again, bringing it back to that mission focus and not worrying about all the little hoopla details.
Great.
That's that gravitational pull, Aaron, of KPIs and ways that has to be like, let's measure everything and let's do and so that takes over, that becomes the precedent or the focus instead of the actual mission or intention. Like,
the intention.
And who cares? Like, as long as the basics are done, as long as the mission is accomplished, right? And we do it in a timely manner, right? And under budget, right? Which I agree with that one. And all of the things that actually matter, that's the thing. Right now, what I tell people is,
recruiter.
Right.
What's that, Aaron?
Recruiter may want to know how many contacts they made for their own performance. That would be a useful thing for them to know.
Yes.
But
yes. And I do believe in tracking that, having systems that automatically track that kind of stuff. It shouldn't be manual, right? It should all be automated, especially in this day and age. But automatically tracking all that so that if there is a problem, we can help figure out why, right? And so that, again, for the individuals, if they want to track it, great. But that shouldn't be part of reporting, and it shouldn't be what we focus on.
Great. So much of what we've been talking about dovetails into just mindfulness and meditation, and the opportunity is to stay present to the intention you're out to fulfill, and then what it's going to take to fulfill on that from a open mind, beginner's mind standpoint. Like, let's look at this. And I think that connection between safety and beginner's mind is something that we don't make often enough, that it's difficult to get to beginner's mind if you're not safe. You're not going to get to beginner's mind. You're not willing to be curious or open about it because you're not safe enough to do that. So starting with that level of safety is critical to the opportunity, to opening the biggest opportunity. And I don't think we have enough attention on safety.
I agree.
To have as a starting point for stuff.
Yeah. And one thing too that I tell a lot of leaders that's really, really missed in the workplace today, and this does not just apply to inclusion or one particular group, this is universal, is that we talk a lot about trust and wanting people to speak up, right? And and all of this. And I even I even hear a lot of people saying authentic self, even in the workplace these days. And that always kind of tickles me. But one thing that's missed a lot is that there has to be action behind listening. And so if you listen to people's input, if you listen to people's feedback, but then you don't do anything with it, the trust is broken. Nothing has changed. The trust is broken. So you need to, if you want to establish trust, if you want to maintain trust, if you want to continue that and create that safety, that psychological safety, right? Then, and that very practical communication, then you have to act on what you receive and make changes. It doesn't mean you have to do everything that everyone suggests, right? That's silly. But let them see that that does happen, and then that trust is established.
Great.
Yeah,
I love that.
so good. Yeah, that's probably a good place to wrap it, Aaron.
Yeah, we can wrap it right there.
Yeah. Katherine, if people want to reach out and learn more about what you do in the world, how can they find you?
Actually, right now, my websites are completely under construction again. So I would just say LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn. Come find me, reach out, let's chat.
And that's Katherine with a K and an E on the end, Katherine McCord.
Yeah, Katherine, McCord, McCord. I'm one of literally 3 with that spelling on LinkedIn. So you can find me.
Nice. There you go. Love that. So good.
Excellent.
So
Well,
good.
Katherine, thanks so
Aaron,
much for taking the time.
You're welcome.
Aaron,
I've enjoyed it.
Aaron, when's your next
Living a
mindfulness
Grateful
course?
Life in a Fucked Up World starts on May 28th. And that's for if you're interested in the How to Live a Grateful Life in a Fucked Up Industry for real estate professionals, you can join me over at therealtorsedge.com and get your application. And if you are interested in living a grateful life in a fucked up world, then that's at thegratefulbreath.com. And that's also starting on May 28th.
Love it. So good. All right. And if you guys watching this are watching this, stay on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe. If you're listening to this on a podcast directory, hey, leave us a review because that would be solid. Do us a solid and leave us a review. Thanks, gang, for hanging out. We'll catch you next time. Peace.
Peace.